Dear sisters and brothers in Christ, this is Archbishop Perez with a special message recognizing the incredible work of the St. Raymond Nonnatus Foundation for Freedom, Family, and Faith. In 2015, its founders were inspired by the World Meeting of Families and the visit of Pope Francis to create a pastoral ministry in Philadelphia for the benefit of families facing relationship crisis. The foundation ministers to struggling families and individuals through a confidential prayer line, pastoral appointment with priests, retreats, and much more. I'm deeply grateful for the work of the St. Raymond Nonnatus Foundation. In a short time, it has already strengthened and sustained hundreds of families. For more information about this pastoral ministry, please visit the website on your screen and join me in praying for families throughout a local church. May God bless you abundantly.
Hello, and welcome to a podcast from the St. Raymond Nonnatus Foundation for Freedom, Family, and Faith. This is Anne DeSantis, joined by my wonderful guest, Caroline Godin. Caroline, thank you so much for joining us on the podcast.
Absolutely.
And this is our series on 12 ways to heal in dealing with a crisis. And this is episode 2. And we're going to talk about acceptance. You know, I think with any type of adversity that we go through, either individually or as a family, there is some sense of having to accept what is and realizing that sometimes the way that life was before might not be the same. So let me start out with you. Well, first of all, I want to introduce you, the fact that you are a wife, a mother, a Catholic author with Epic Pew, Catholic 365, and also Catholic Mom. And then you also have other apostolates going on. Tell us a little bit more about the things that you do in your life, aside from just being a wife and a mother.
That's that permeates every part. But so I do a lot of freelance writing, and one of the companies that I write for and do a lot of other publicist work for is First Responder Coaching, which is a life coaching business specifically for first responders and their families, comprised of only first responders and first responder family members. So it's a we get it kind of situation. And you can find all that, all about that company from firstresponder.coaching.org. That's 1ST, respondercoaching.org. Always like to plug that service. And then I also do, I also work in a martial arts dojo. I do Taekwondo. I am a second degree recommended black belt now, and I work at the school as well.
You're a busy lady. And you're also a catechist, I should say, too, which is a very important facet of who you are for this podcast, because you definitely know your faith. And that's what we're going to be talking about during this series, are ways that we, and I say we because it's not just the audience, right? It's you and I too, Caroline.
That's
ways
right.
that we deal with adversities, crisis, traumas that happen in our lives. And I think all of us at one time or another have gone through something.
Yes.
I would like to read through just a list that I made up, a list that I comprised of 7 discussion points that we're going to talk about during this podcast. Now, they might not be in any specific order, but in terms of acknowledgement of your problem or your issue, number 1 is acknowledgement in order to face the issue. 2, prayer and discernment to find the right help. Remember that one. 3 is researching ways to help your situation by asking the right people. I think that's super important. 4 is taking the next necessary steps to find a solution with God's help. 5 is finding support. 6 is accepting your new circumstance with balance and care. And 7 is staying on the course with your faith. So, we might not cover everything during the podcast. This is only a half-hour podcast, but I mean, let's start out with that first one, Caroline, acknowledgement in order to face the issue. Tell us your take on that, and if you've ever had to deal with that in your own life and how that's helped you.
Yeah. So, I mean, I can't go into the details, but that I had faced a job loss several years back. And it was a job that I was there for almost 19, 20 years. And it was really difficult. A lot of my supporters at the place I worked were retired or moved on or just not there anymore. So things change in companies all the time, and all of a sudden, a couple decades into this job, and things were going to change, and I wasn't going to be able to stay there. And that was a really difficult situation for me. Again, I'm being vague, but there were some circumstances. Facing that, I never would have considered where I'm at right now. I never would have considered like the jobs that I'm doing now. I wouldn't have considered the schedule that we're keeping our family right now. And I would never have even said, yeah, no, we can take that pay cut, that massive difference in our financial life, and take this risk. I would never have taken that risk. But I look back on it and the anxiety that it caused, and I was physically sick over it. But when I decided to, and I've been a cradle Catholic, right? So I've always had a faith. And yet, even though I've always had that faith, I still faced this uncertainty with fear. When I finally decided to put it all at the foot of the cross and take it head on, I started to have a little relief. And I was finally able to start looking at it differently. Okay, I'm going to have new opportunities. I didn't like a lot of the details surrounding it. I didn't like a lot of the prospects of, well, how are we going to take care of this? How are we going to take care of this? I was like, well, I am doing what I know is the right thing to do, and God's got this. I was standing behind my faith in the moment, and in doing so, I knew that God wouldn't abandon me. And that's where I needed to be in that moment.
Yeah, well said, because I do think that what you're saying to us on this podcast is that you had a certain amount of acceptance, about what God's will was going to be, even though it was a tough circumstance, something very difficult. And I've said this on other podcasts before, that we can't control the actions of other people. And it does cause us to have to rearrange and have a plan B, doesn't it?
It
And I think
certainly does.
what you're telling us is that you had to have that plan B.
Mm-hmm.
And I think a lot of us, I don't know about all of you who are watching this podcast, but I mean, I think plan B winds up being sometimes what happens to most of us. You sometimes even plan C.
Mm-hmm.
And some people who are watching this podcast, maybe they've been affected by a divorce or a separation or a relationship crisis or a job loss, something, health
Mm-hmm.
crisis. You had to do a plan B, didn't you? And I think that that's why we are doing this podcast on acceptance, because oftentimes through the foundation, me being executive director, we get emails and phone calls of people that are very desperate, and they want things, they're praying for things to kind of stay the way they are, and for something bad not to happen in their lives. But
Mm-hmm.
unfortunately, sometimes, like I said, because of sin, because of so many other things, we do have to have that backup plan of how we're going to handle life. So
Yeah.
I really love that example that you gave. Number 2 on my list is prayer and discernment to find the right help. Don't you think that when something happens to us, that we do have to have that right discernment in our prayer with God, and even with other people, our family, our husband, our wife, our parents, whoever that is, whoever that support system is, of like, okay, this happened to me. Now what? What do I do? I didn't know if you wanted to share any ideas or thoughts that you have on that.
Yeah. Well, anyone that's listened to our podcasts or read any of my work knows that I lean heavily on the rosary. And I say during Lent, I'm saying 2 a day. I always say 1 a day. And I've been pretty strong with that. But there are times that I think there's not enough rosaries that I could say in a day because of whatever worry or concern is going on. And I always put an intention behind every rosary. Okay, who am I praying for this time? And so for me, when I'm really stuck on a situation and I'm having a hard time, whether it's accepting, yep, this is going to happen, I need to figure out a way to move on, or I'm just at an impasse, I don't know what decision to make. I lean on that prayer, because even if it doesn't feel like it's being answered right in the moment, I know that, okay, I've put that prayer out there. Now I can put this to rest, and I can sleep tonight, or I can go do this next thing in my day, because prayer is so powerful. And even if we don't get to see the results of it physically or right away, the more you pray, the greater your faith is going to be that you are going to be taken care of. Something will come your way.
So true. And I think especially for people who are down and out. I mean, we're taping this right now in Lenten season. It's going to air, I believe, during the Easter season, or right at the tail end of the Easter season. But isn't it so true that when we pray, we are communicating with God? It's a two-way conversation, right? It's a lot of listening on our part, right, to God and what he's saying. And then there's some speaking that we do to God too. I mean, though God knows our hearts, we don't need to verbally say, hey, God, I'm really in trouble, I need this or that, because he already knows. I mean, it's really for ourselves that we say it out loud, I think, more than anything else. Now, number 3 on my list that I read at the beginning of the podcast is to research ways to help your situation by asking the right people. Now, I'm going to bring up the fact that in my own life, I think that the key words in that sentence that I just wrote is the right people. When you ask the wrong people, people who don't know you, people who don't know the situation, people who are not those of faith, right? You might not get the right answer. So you need to be very careful about who you ask.
Mm-hmm.
I would say ask a wise person in your life, someone who you trust. It doesn't necessarily have to be an older person too. Sometimes when we think of wise, we think of somebody who's over the age of 65 or something like that, but not always. Sometimes older people, there's younger people who are just as wise as an older person. So I don't think it has to do with age. I think it has to do with you having to pray and acknowledge in your own life, who's a wise person who will give me the right kind of advice that's not going to bring me down a wrong path. So please do talk about that, if you would.
Yeah. I mean, so it starts with asking God. He's always the right person. And that's with prayer, which we talked about. So we're always going to ask God first, and it's not like, God, fix this for me. It's, God, help me to see the way you want me to see this situation. That's a great start. Help me to see it the way you want me to see it. Because if we see things the way God wants us to see them, we're going to see them with clarity. And it's going to make it's going to either make sense, or if it can't make sense, it's going to at least give us some sort of affirmation that, nope, you're where you need to be right now. It may be uncomfortable. You may not like where you are, but this is where you need to be. It's that stepping stone to whatever's next. And he knows what's next. And then the next thing is asking yourself. And I'm going to say it's not just asking the right people. It's asking the right questions. You're not just saying, how do I make this bad thing not happen? Well, it may not be about making the bad thing not happen. It might be about your response. How are you facing it? And then when it comes down to the right people, I mean, I can't answer on here for what that answer is going to be for everyone else that's listening or watching, but I can tell you that a good right person to start with is going to be the church. If you bring this to a priest or someone in the church, or even start reading the catechism and just start finding out what's the church's perspective on this kind of situation, because it's out there. The material is out there. It's all online. It's in the Gospels. Start reading, reaching out, talk to someone, especially talk to a priest, and start seeking counsel in that regard. And then that person can also help you find out who in your life is the right person to talk to.
I love what you just said, because it isn't just finding the right person, right? It's a lot more than that. It's a discernment. It's also looking in the mirror and realizing that ultimately the decisions are going to be with you, because God doesn't use some kind of a magic formula or wand to just make things happen. I mean, he does put things in our minds, hearts, souls, and he tries to guide us. Now, with that said, what you said about talking to a priest, I have to mention about that free service that we have where you can contact us at nonnatus.org and make a free pastoral consultation with a Catholic priest, with a Mercedarian priest, the people who founded us, the religious order who founded us, the priests who founded us. So all you need to do is just go there, go to the drop down for speak to a priest, and then that'll go to me and I'll set up that free appointment with you. Now, the next thing on this list that I wrote, and like I said, this is just a loose idea of what you do for acceptance, is taking the necessary steps to find a solution with God's help. You might find out in your research with talking to a priest or going online or speaking to a family member, but you're going to need to take steps. Like, one of the things that we deal with in this foundation, of course, are people who have very severe relationship issues. It could be someone who is already divorced, and maybe they've been divorced for years. It could even be you who are watching this. And now you're thinking, is it time for me to think about like an annulment or something? So these are things that need to have steps, right? They're not just a once and done. You do need to go through and find out what are those steps for you to find the healing. If you're looking for a job, right? You lose your job. What are those steps for you to find the right position wherever you live and whatever you do for a living? So let's talk about steps, because don't you think, Caroline, that it's more than just our discerning and saying, okay, I'm going to do this. Well, now you got to find out how to do that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because I mean, until you accept where you are right now, you can't move forward to where you want to be. And it doesn't mean that you have to be happy about where you are. You could have a terrible thing might be happening right now, and that's certainly don't need to be happy about that. There's no rule that says you have to be okay with what's happening. It just means you need to say, yep, this is my situation right now. And, when a door closes in your life, you have a choice. Everything is a choice. You can stare at that closed door and you can be upset about it. You can even try to open it, but it's not going to open. Or you can look around and you can say, all right, what other avenues do I have? How else can I look at the situation? And I've spoken to people that have gone through job loss, career loss, first responders who are medically discharged. They can no longer be in law enforcement. They can no longer be a firefighter. I've spoken to people who have lost loved ones and through tragedy. And until they reach that, yep, this is what it is. And, you could still be mourning or you can still be upset, but you've made that decision to say, yes, that's what happened. I'm accepting that. Now they can take the steps to say, okay, what's next? And they have to ask themselves the right questions. And it's not, what do I do? It's, what am I looking for? What do I need? What resources do I already have that can get me there or take me one tiny step closer to where I need to be? Who do I know that can help me with that? And when you start taking these steps, little steps, tiny steps turn to bigger steps. Bigger steps get you to your goals. And that gets you to a better situation. Doesn't mean you have to be okay with what happened. It just means that you've accepted it and you've found a path forward.
Yeah, that's right. I agree with you. And being that I work for the foundation where I'm on a weekly basis, I am communicating with people who are in need and people who have gone through some tragic and traumatic experiences, whether it be something to do with a relationship or something else. So I think you made a good point. Until you have that sense of acceptance, because what I hear sometimes in my life, not only with the foundation, but just in life circumstance, is that when people stay in that hurt, whatever it is, maybe they lost a loved one, maybe their husband or wife died, or their child or their parent. And when you stay there and you stay depressed, that's, it's where you're going to stay. Okay. And your life is not going to be able to really continue forth with God if you stay stuck in that depression, anxiety, and all of those other things. Now, with that said, I mean, we're going to talk during this series about finding professional help too, because you might need to go to a therapist or a psychologist or psychiatrist or a doctor or someone or something that's more holistic, whatever you decide. But it's good to think about those things, because the next thing on my list of number 5 on the list is finding support, whatever that is. Now, maybe it's somebody who's addicted to something. Maybe it's alcohol or drugs or eating. So finding support might be going to an AA meeting or an anonymous meeting or something. But that's where finding support would make a difference for you. And with the foundation, that again, that is something that we can help you with. We also have an outside resources page on our website. So talk a little bit about finding support, because don't you think sometimes you need to find some kind of group or person that you can go through this process with, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. The easiest way to find support is, if you're on social media, there's support groups and like-minded people of all different types online. And sometimes that's a great spot to start, where you're like, I have no idea where to start. Just go on to, whether it's Facebook or anywhere, and just search what the issue is, and or just like-mindedness. I'm on a Catholic Moms Facebook group, and there's all different situations that people bring up there, and they'll say, hey, this is what I'm going through. Does anyone know where I can reach out? And you would think that wouldn't be the first place you go, but it's such a great community that people jump right in on it and say, oh, this is what, this is a similar situation that I had or a friend had, and this is how they reached out, and everyone's just really supportive. So having that as a starting point isn't so bad. You're going to find like-minded people that are going to kind of be with you in solidarity. But then to take it a step further, don't discount yourself. Everyone deserves support. Don't throw it away and say, I'm fine. The I'm fine lie. It's not. It's only going to bother you and make things harder. So reach out, find either a therapist or a life coach, and start taking the steps towards getting the support that you need, and that will help you to stand on your own feet and be in a better situation for yourself, your family members, maybe for your kids, especially if you have kids. You are their support. So you're not going to be able to be a good support for them unless you are standing on your own 2 feet securely. So don't discount yourself. You are worth getting whatever help that you need.
Yes, you are worth that. Very much so. You're loved by God and by others. And so find that support. Now we have 2 more on this list that I have. Number 6 is accepting your new circumstance with balance and care. I think balance is very important. It's like self-care, the way that you take care of yourself, eating, sleeping, the way that your day goes, taking time out for yourself. These are things that help you with your acceptance of your situation. You need to take care of yourself. Now, this is a Catholic podcast, and obviously a lot of the topics we're going to do on this whole 12-part series will be very faith related. But we also have to be sort of realistic too about just daily living. So it's not just talk about prayer and the saints and adoration and going to mass, right? It's going to be daily living. So talk about that, because don't you think it is definitely going to be about self-care?
Yes, self-care is so important. If we're not taking care of ourselves, we're setting ourselves up for failure. And that's the hard truth of it. So if I want to reach a new level in my martial arts training, I have to continue my training every day. I can't just show up to class and expect to be doing a great job. So you can't jump into running a marathon without having trained for it and stretching every day and working out every day, that sort of thing. So if you're looking for a better situation than where you're at right now, whether it's a marital concern, whether it has to do with custody with your children, or if it has to do with jobs, or whatever your situation is that you're looking to make better, you have to take care of yourself along the way. So that might mean that you need to take a 5-minute break from whatever you're doing. It might mean that you need to, I need to make sure I go to bed early, or I need to make sure that I get up on time, or I need to make sure that I'm eating healthy. And, and I'm not just like banging down drinks and eating junk food because I don't feel like cooking. Well, there's other dietary things you can do if you're having a hard time motivating yourself to eat healthy and cook meals. There's other things that you can do to kind of take steps towards doing better. Every day, be a little bit better than the day before. And if you fall off that track, get back on, because it's worth taking care of yourself. You are worth taking care of.
So important, because I do think that sometimes when people go through a crisis, there is that feeling not good about yourself in some way. And I don't know if you've ever experienced it, and it did help me sometimes, is that when I felt that way in the past, when I was being prayed over or attended some type of prayer meeting with charismatic Catholics, not something I do all the time anymore, but there's a time and place for something like that. And if there is a prayer meeting or prayer group at your church or another parish, I mean, it can't hurt to learn more about it, because sometimes when you're around people who you can talk to, you can trust, and they can lay hands on you and pray and help you to be healed. Now, remember, healing's not a once and done. I can't say that enough, because even if you go to some kind of a prayer meeting, you're not going to walk out of there and feel like life is perfect. It just won't happen. It's very rare that it happens. It can happen, but most of the time it doesn't. That's not how God works, I don't think. But the next step, the last step, is staying on the course with your faith. So keep going to mass, keep going to confession, keep praying, keep close to the Catholic Church. Don't give up on your faith. So that's our last point before we end. Caroline, what's your take on that one?
Well, our faith is it's the foundation of our beliefs and how we live our lives. So if you don't believe in anything, then you'll believe in anything. Do you know what I mean? So you have to have a faith base. Everyone has some sort of sense of morality, some sense of ethics. But where does that come from? Why do we believe that life is important? Why do we believe that that people have value? Well, we believe that because God made us in his image. And like I tell my students, that doesn't mean, 2 eyes, a nose, a mouth, 2 arms, 2 legs. His image is talking about the image of his heart. We are made in his image, the image of his heart, which means we are made for love. We are made to care for one another. If you keep your faith as the foundation of how you live your life, it's a guide. It is what's keeping you on those train tracks of wherever God is leading you. It's what's holding you onto the path that he's led you on, and he's not going to lead you to destruction. He has a good plan for you. As he says in Jeremiah, I have good plans for you, plans for hope and life. And we have to hang on to that, because that's going to be what guides us to a better state of mind and a better state of our heart and a better state of our life in general.
That's right. This has been a great podcast. I think we covered a lot. And just a reminder, this is a whole 12-part series. This is episode 2. Make sure you go back and watch episode 1 on our YouTube channel and subscribe at the Philly Nonnatus YouTube channel. Caroline, any final words before we end?
Just, I want to echo that self-care. Take care of yourself. You are worth taking care of. You are worth the love that God has for you. And, well, he has it for you, whether you feel that way or not. So if we lean on that, we can accept where we are and move forward.
That's right. So well said. I'm excited for the other episodes in this series. Thank you all for tuning in. Don't forget to connect with us at nonnatus.org. We will see you next time.